You prayed about it, but your mind didn't stop. You were hoping for some kind of relief after your prayer, but it wasn't there. And now you're just sitting there thinking, what do I do now? Because if we're being honest with each other, it almost feels like nothing happened. And that's a hard place to sit, especially when you're praying about something that really matters. So let me just be real with you for a minute. Recently, I was praying about something and it wasn't small. See, we're trying to find a place to move into, okay? And this move is not just a matter of inconvenience. This is one of those situations where if it doesn't work out, things get real serious. So when this move started to take place 2 months ago, I prayed about it. And I've been praying ever since. Because that's what I know to do. And I asked God to provide. I asked God to open something up. I asked Him to make a way for us. And I think that if I'm being honest, I expected something when I was done. Not necessarily a miracle right away, but movement. Some kind of relief. Some sort of peace. Of a knowing that, yep, I prayed about it, God's gonna come through. But it wasn't there. Nothing changed inside of me. And almost immediately this thought showed up. And the thought was that I'm still going to have to figure out everything on my own. Like, maybe God heard me. Maybe He didn't hear me. The questions. And I didn't feel comforted. I felt like, honestly, the responsibility was still on me. And what happens next is something that most people will not talk about. Because when that relief doesn't come, your mind goes right back to work. Right back to figuring everything out. And I started to try to solve everything again. I started running through situations, looking at options that honestly weren't even that solid to begin with, trying to push things that didn't really make sense. Maybe they made sense in that moment, but long term they don't make sense. I was going over worst case scenarios, trying to come up with a backup plan, or many backup plans for that matter, just in case nothing works, just in case God doesn't come through. And you don't call it that. You don't. But that's what it is. You do it because you don't know if God's going to come through or not. You're not doing that because you don't believe in God. You're doing it because you're scared of what happens if nothing works. And for me, it wasn't just stress, all right? For me, in this situation, it was this thought that if we don't figure this out, that Rachel and I are going to end up living out of the car. That's not overthinking. And that's not small. You know, that's real life. It's about as real as it gets, right? And this is where it gets hard. Because people will tell you, just trust God. But they don't sit in the moments that you sit in. Because in that moment of need, trusting God feels like you're not doing anything, while everything is at risk. And that's where I struggle. Because I've prayed before. I've prayed before and things did not turn out the way that I needed them to turn out. So now when I pray, sometimes there's a part of me that still wonders, is anything actually happening? And I think this is where a lot of people quietly just break. You know, I broke oftentimes myself. Not out loud, but internally. You pray. You say the right things, right? But you don't actually feel any different. And then you go right back to carrying it. You go right back to carrying what it is you prayed for in the first place. And that's when I started to realize something. Maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't not that the prayer didn't work. The problem is that I expected prayer to remove the pressure, instead of realizing that even though I prayed the prayer, I was still holding on to it. I never actually released it. Yeah, I said it to God. I prayed it to God. But I didn't release it. No, I prayed and then I picked it right back up. And that's what I'm learning, albeit slowly, is that I don't always get a feeling right away. That I don't always get peace instantly. But that does not mean that God isn't working. Because I need this to be true right now. I need to know that God is actually working and that He will come through, even if it is at the last possible minute, which in the case of this movie situation is exactly what's happening. But that is what I'm holding on to with both hands. My faith and my trust in God. So maybe tonight this is what it looks like. Not solving everything, okay? Not trying to control every possible outcome. Not building 10 backup plans. But noticing when your mind grabs hold of those thoughts again, that fear, that anxiety, that worry, and then choosing to put it back in God's hands and leaving it there. You prayed and it didn't feel like anything changed. But that doesn't mean nothing happened. It might just mean this. You're being asked to trust Him without seeing the results first. You're not waiting on God to move. You're learning to trust Him without proof. I'm learning to trust Him without proof. You're not alone in this. God is working, even if it comes through at the last minute.